moment to reflect on the lands in which you are joining from, as well as your relationship to those lands and to the Indigenous people who have and continue to inhabit them. I would also like to take a moment to express gratitude towards our generous sponsors for your support and commitment. A heartfelt thanks to our organizing team and advisory board for your dedication and unwavering efforts to bring these events to life. Finally, thanks to all of you for your participation throughout the week. If you were unable to attend any of our prior sessions, check out our YouTube page where all of our events from today and the rest of Black and Neuro Week are available. We hope that you will continue to engage with us throughout this session and share any highlights from which you learned today on social media using the hashtags BinWeek24 and NeuroRacism. Today, we will be diving into our theme by discussing the current state of DEI and what actions can be made towards its reprioritization. Our panelists will be leading the discussion today as we look to reclaim the conversation. And so it's only fitting for us to introduce ourselves. I'll begin. My name is Janelle Johnson, and I am the Development Director for Black and Neuro. I am also a recent graduate from Howard University, where I received my bachelor's degree in biology, and currently a neurodegenerative computational fellow at Stanford University School of Medicine. I'll pass it on to my fellow moderator and panelist, Emanuela.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much again for joining us. My name is Emanuela Bassi, and I'm a recent graduate from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in neuroscience as well as a minor in French. And currently, I'm pursuing my master's of cancer biology at Paul Sabatier University. And all of the BIN team, I am serving as the incoming chapters manager.
Dr. Tolbert.
Hi, good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Blanton Tolbert. I am the Vice President of Science Leadership and Culture at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in Chevy Chase, Maryland. I am also a professor of biochemistry, biophysics at the University of Pennsylvania, and I am just delighted to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. And finally, last but not least, Dr. Dukes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Angeline Dukes. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Neuroscience at the University of Minnesota. I have a unique position where I don't run a research lab, but I am teaching faculty. Half of my job is devoted to teaching graduate and undergraduate neuroscience courses, and then the other half of my job is devoted to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And part of that work, I co-direct 3 NIH-funded programs, and I also have the pleasure of serving as the founding president of Black and Neuro.
Thank you so much, panelists, for joining us today as I look forward to diving into today's topic. I'll open up the discussion with a question we posed to the community over the past few weeks on social media, which is, what has DEI inspired you to reclaim in your life? And so, Dr. Tolbert, if you don't mind, why don't we start with you?
Thank you for the question. So let me start first by congratulating Ben. I think this is 4 years that you have your organization, and I just want to uplift that and celebrate you on such a huge accomplishment and acknowledge the work that you have done to build community with neuroscientists, those of us who are marginalized and of color, and these type of efforts are very important. In terms of just sort of thinking about what DEI has sort of meant to me and reflecting on it, the word that I think that's top of mind is gratitude. Being given opportunities to engage in research at an early age as an undergrad, to really sort of be able to explore and to participate in hands-on research set me on a trajectory to be where I am today. And certainly if it wasn't for those type of efforts that were designed to broaden participation for people who come from backgrounds like many of those who are on the Zoom today, the webinar, I don't think I would actually be able to sit here with you today with the credentials that I have. The other thing that I think about as I reflect on it, given sort of the times that we're living in, is just the importance of really focusing efforts on expanding opportunities for all individuals, regardless of identities. We have to be very dedicated and committed to knowing that we do the very best science when we have people from many different backgrounds engaged in the process of scientific discovery. And so I just wanted to share those things, and looking forward to engaging more in this conversation.
Absolutely amazing. And I know the conversation will be fruitful today because of your insights. So we're very, very grateful to have you. Dr. Dukes, how about you?
Oh, I think I have, well, I second everything that Dr. Tilbert has said, obviously, like absolutely amazing work that has been ongoing. And I absolutely give credit to all of the different DI programs that I've been a part of for my ability to do the things that I do and for where I am today. And also I went to an HBCU for undergrad, so Fisk University, and that 100% put me on the trajectory of even knowing that I could be a scientist because I saw other Black women professors who were doing the things and they were like, if you want to do this, you can do it too. And so they're the ones who inspired me. And now I have the opportunity to then be that role model for others. But I think something that I've been trying to reclaim, and it's a newer, very much like newer approach, is rest. I think that I have been getting a little burned out. And I think that's a normal experience for everyone doing this work. This is hard work, right? Like pushing for diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts constantly can be exhausting. And I'm so grateful to the Black and Neuro team because I know that, if I do need to take a breather and rest, then I'm sure all of you will know this as well, but someone else will step in. And it is such a phenomenal team, and having the support and having others that you can lean on and depend on truly makes a difference. But that's one thing that I would hope for all of us who are doing these efforts is to be able to reclaim a little bit of rest.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. And that's built into our programming, right? Black and Their Rest Day that we have. And so that's a legacy that you've paid forward, and we're very grateful for that. Emanuela, what about you?
Yeah, so for me, I would say that DEI has allowed me to reclaim a sense of belonging. Has given me a chance to have my voice and experiences accounted for, normally in places where I wouldn't be seen, and people that look like me wouldn't have seats at the table. I think it's very easy because of the notion surrounding DEI, especially in our current day and age, to feel like an imposter, to feel like you don't belong, like where you are supposed to be and where you are qualified to be. So having it at the back of my mind, like in any space that I step into, that someone somewhere had it in mind and deemed it important for me to be there, not only to contribute to conversations but also learn from what's being said in the room and take it back with me to wherever I'm going in the world and contribute to that space, means a lot to me, because without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I would say a sense of belonging in space.
I can definitely empathize with that feeling as a first generation student, just going into a space and not knowing. And I think that inspires my answer as well. I would say that DEI has inspired me to reclaim my space in every room. And oftentimes I'm very hyper aware of the positionality that I have in a space, especially when it comes to academia. And it creates a level of like discomfort, basically, where I'm often feeling that I have to navigate through, in addition to being aware of other people's feelings in the room. And so over the past few years, I found comfort in knowing that my presence is both a physical and powerful reminder of the change makers and visionaries who have worked over centuries to break glass ceilings for me to freely exist in those spaces. And so I have no choice but to reclaim them because they're rightfully ours. But to be frank, we're here with this panel to discuss the current state of DEI, right? And so I want to create a follow-up question here as to why is the reprioritization of DEI so urgent to address right now? And so I think anybody who feels, wants to answer, feel free to jump in right now.
Start on this. I think that the deprioritization issue is so urgent to address is because we're impacting real people, right? Like I think in both of your answers, Manuela and Janelle, you are people who are going through these experiences, right? Like you are trying to navigate academia and higher education and find space for yourselves and develop this sense of belongingness. And these are like real issues that are affecting you and your ability to reach your goals and to thrive right now. And you 100%, and every single person who comes from a historically marginalized background deserves the opportunity to thrive. They just do. And if it if for whatever reason people can't grasp that concept, it also 100% makes our science better, right? Like having diverse perspectives and being able to bring in all of these different viewpoints, it really makes it so much better. It allows for unique innovation. It really drives that. It allows us to think differently and expand our reach. And homogenous experiences are never the answer. We have to be able to cultivate these communities where we're bringing in all of these different people with different lived experiences and different perspectives who can then add to the science, and we can grow and expand and just all be better for it. But I do still 100% just believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to thrive in higher education. And everything that's going on with the state of DEI right now is pushing against that.
Absolutely. I think it's a very interesting panel that we have here because obviously me and Emanuela can kind of relate in terms of being early career stage researchers, but you know, for you, Dr. Dixon, Dr. Tolbert, you guys have been here quite a while. So I'm very interested to know about your perspective on DEI and how that's kind of changed over time as well, in addition to how urgent it is and how important it is to address the issue today.
Yeah, maybe I'll just follow on from Dr. Dukes. I mean, we're living in a really interesting time socially, politically, in this country. And I think that, first, as we really explore the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, we have to start with just stating the obvious. And what's a fundamental fact is that diversity is foundational to all of life, right? So that's just that's a known quantity. It's a fact. Equity inclusion, we have to prioritize, and part of that is actually understanding and reconciling historical events in this country, and really sort of grappling with those tensions that exist between us in terms of our cultures and our lived experiences. But through the process of doing that, right, through the process of creating those inclusive environments where, all people, regardless of their backgrounds, can be seen, can be heard, can be valued. Just again, leaning into what Dr. Duke said, I mean, in terms of science, we know that we're going to advance scientific discoveries. It's going to be more rigorous because you're going to have people who are coming in with different perspectives. They're going to elevate questions that, maybe I didn't think about in the way that I'm approaching the science because I have my own blinders on. But other people will see something that perhaps I'm not seeing. And then also just the ingenuity and the creativity that we all bring as humans. We want more of that in science, and we need to tap into all of that potential and capacity that exists. And so I think, again, just sort of to restate, diversity is a fact of life, right? Um, we all can agree to that. Particularly as scientists, we lean into the heterogeneity in biological systems. We think deeply about that, and it excites us. Equity and inclusion are the things that we really have to have those tough conversations about. And then we have to understand what are the barriers that have, really stymied and prevented many individuals from engaging authentically within the scientific process. So again, just agreeing completely with what Dr. Duke shared, and I think will also be a common themes throughout the rest of the conversation.
No, I agree. It's incredibly important just to make sure that not just one type of voice or the voice that's usually chosen as the path of least resistance is allowed to be at the table. But to your point, Dr. Tolbert and also Dr. Dukes, is how diversity is a factor of life, and your magnification of that is incredibly important, which leads to our next question that kind of gets in the more personal aspect of things, because as people of color doing science, we are not immune to experiencing different things in this field. So in your own personal experiences, how do you feel that DEI and overall community advocacy has influenced and impacted your career trajectory? You can start off with anyone that would like to take on this question.
Yeah, maybe I'll lead off here. I touched on this earlier. My first experience in undergrad was provided by, a mechanism from the National Science Foundation that was targeted to states that didn't receive a lot of federal funding for biomedical or STEM research in general. And so you can imagine that within those states, there are a large population of Black and Brown people. So I was a beneficiary of that type of early support. And it got me engaged in science. I mean, I was always curious as a kid, but I didn't really know what the scientific process was like. I didn't know what it meant to work in a lab alongside a postdoc, alongside a graduate student. And so it was that early exposure that was supported by programs that were really targeted to those who are marginalized from STEM that, led me along my way. I also attended, an HBCU as a part of my own trajectory before I went and did my PhD. And just reflecting on those experiences, I often say that it was within that environment that I was nurtured to become a scientist, right? And that I didn't have to worry about sort of being the only person that looked like me in those spaces. And I could just then lean into, digging deep into science and becoming the scientist that I am today. So I think these efforts are deeply important. I think that we have to uplift them. And again, I'm just delighted what this organization has done to build that community. Because when I was going through the process at my early career stages, community was hard to assemble. It was difficult. And so I've just been delighted to sort of observe over the past several years how these communities have formed and you all are supporting each other. And I would say continue to lean into it. It's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This work is crucial to the future because there's God knows how many coming after us that will be in these same positions, hopefully having different conversations because things would have been more progressed in a and in a better light. But I also can attest to just how amazing it is that there are DEI programs and programs that ensure that you could get exposed to research early on or in undergrad. For me, during my, I think, third year of undergrad when I was still at UT Austin, I had the opportunity to participate in the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation in Research. And I think that truly propelled me into the sphere I am today, because without it, I never would have gone to France. I never would have done research at a brain institute and got to see an action potential light up a neuron under a microscope for the first time. So I definitely do see the importance and resonate heavily with making sure that opportunities like this aren't just available for a select few, but for everyone, so that they can have those experiences and be inspired as well. But how about you, Dr. Dukes? Would you like to jump in here as well?
Yeah, I very much agree. And I touched on this briefly that being able to like attend my HBCU and being involved in different DEI programs is what set me on this trajectory. I will share briefly like one little story that I have openly shared before, but based on my very first summer undergraduate research experience, I would have left science. There's no way I would have continued. The lab that I was in was very problematic. It was a racist lab at a big R1 institution, and they made me feel like I didn't belong there. They made me feel like I didn't have a space in science. They made me feel like, it just wasn't for me, that I couldn't succeed in that space. But what did reinforce my feelings of belongingness is because I was part of the Mark U Star program at Fisk, and having my program directors and my cohort of peers who were also having the same goal, they're the ones who reinforced for me that, yes, I do belong here. Yes, I can thrive in science. Like, that was a bad experience, but that's not the end all be all. That's not the way that it should be in my different research experiences. And because of them, because of that program, I decided to continue on and pursue my PhD. And so these types of DEI related programs are so essential for so many reasons: access to opportunities. It's being paid to be able to work in a lab. That way you don't have to volunteer your time, because let's face it, all of us need to be paid, right? Like, we have bills to pay. You can't just spend your time volunteering. But also it really builds community. And that's a lot of the work that I try to do with the current DEI related programs that I run right now, is really focus on this community building aspect, because it makes such a huge difference in whether or not someone chooses to continue to pursue their PhD or chooses to leave academia as a whole.
Wow, thank you so much for your transparency, and also just touching on, again, the importance of community, because I believe if you're not seeing community where you're going, it's kind of an indicator of how will I thrive in this space, or how will I feel that I can actually be here and be my best self as I'm pursuing X thing or X endeavor. How about you, Janelle, if you'd like to chime in on this as well?
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm just really happy to see a lot of HBCU love on this call. I'm not gonna lie, because that is definitely one of the things that influenced my trajectory as an early career researcher. And I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have today if it wasn't for me going to my HBCU. And so I'm very grateful to see that the work and the legacy of those institutions live on in the conversation we're having today and in the broader scheme of DEI initiatives. And so I also want to give a shameless plug to Black and Narrow. Just to be frank, I joined this organization in my freshman year of college when the COVID pandemic was happening. And so there weren't a lot of in-person opportunities for research at that time, of course. And it was in that time that I was able to find this group and find this community where I was able to find people who look like me and get the representation that I wanted to see in the field. And so this has been just a monumental group in my life and how I was able to develop in that case. But also in the fact that as I mentioned, I am a first generation student. And so science, where I am from, is kind of a minority, a kind of field that you go into. And so being able to be in these kind of spaces has been so influential to my life, and being able to understand that science can look more than a certain way or can be more than a just one type of field has been really, really instrumental. And so I'm very, very grateful to be here and talk about it with all of you and grow in my career going forward.
Shout out to Ben always. Definitely as well would not be here without it, because at my university, there was only like 4% of students were Black. And then on top of that, being even more of a minority in the neurosciences, because I didn't see people that looked like me in my classes, or going to discussions and just being like, okay, like, can I actually like thrive in this space? Will I get this degree? Because any level of education is difficult. But very thankful to have also been introduced to Ben during my second year of undergrad, and then being able to stay on and also just be not just being in community, but being with people that actually push you to be your best self and encourage you to take on those opportunities and say, hey, like, if you need help, like, I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to just be a source of support for you. Is incredibly important. So I'm very thankful for Ben. But just segueing into the next part of our conversation, kind of switching gears a little bit to what's happening legislatively. So the question that I'd like to pose is, how has the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action specifically impacted the work that you do, and what are the downstream or butterfly effects that you're seeing from that at this time?
Before I answer that question, I just wanted to say that you two are like very much the reason why we started Black and Narrow, right? Like, you and everyone else who doesn't get to see themselves represented at their institutions or see themselves like in this field, just being able to have this community and to know that we're here, it just, yes, that is exactly what we aim to do. And I'm really glad that you are able to reap the benefits of that. But to answer your question in relation to affirmative action and the Supreme Court ruling, I'm very grateful that my department at my university are proud supporters of DEI work. Like, they have continued to support the work that I do, to elevate the work that I do, to continue to push for these programmings to be able to get renewed, to get these grants renewed, to be able to like continue doing this work. They are not running from it, which I truly appreciate. Any types of like ideas I have in relation to community gatherings, or checking in with the historically marginalized students in our graduate program, to the post-bac program that I co-direct, to the summer undergraduate research program, like literally all of the things they are incredibly supportive about. And I am so happy that they are, but unfortunately the same can't be said for all institutions. My students are brilliant and they are wonderful. And we just brought in a new cohort of post-baccalaureate students into our Minds program. And they're this just incredible group of baby scientists. And they're just a beautiful multicultural group as well. We have students who have backgrounds from Burundi and Kashmir and Somalia, and who are Native American and Ethiopian. And we have a transgender man who is a non-traditional student and a disabled transgender woman. And we have neurodivergent folks. And I'm not listing their identities to check a box. We did not invite them into this program to just check a box and say like, yeah, we got one of these or we got one of those. That's not the case at all. They are here because they truly have the potential to thrive in neuroscience. And they want to be here. And they're incredible future PIs and future leaders in this field. Like, they are the next generation that are going to be leading these things, but they need support to get there. And I have the privilege of helping them reach their goals. And what's terrifying is that these opportunities and these types of programs are being taken away at other institutions. People are shutting down their DEI offices. They're, letting go of people who focus on these efforts. They're not able to say that they want to support students in this way. And it's scary because these are their rights to higher education that's being put at risk. Because if they don't have the resources and the support that's needed for them to succeed, how can they stay? Right? Like, how are they able to continue to thrive? And so while I'm very grateful to be in a state that supports this and an institution that supports this and a department that supports this, I know that's not the same everywhere. And I'm genuinely afraid for the students because now they're losing people who care about their success and these opportunities that do make a difference in their career trajectory.
I agree 1,000%. And just, you touched on the shockwave of the closures of diversity, equity, and inclusion centers at various universities like across the nation. It's incredibly worrisome because it threatens the existence of these minority students, of these marginalized students in spaces that they're supposed to be in, and like you said, want to be in, because there's not only one kind of people that exist that want to further science and want to create progress for the future. There's people from certain communities that have various backgrounds and experiences that they grew up with that fueled them to want to be in this space, and to be barred because someone somewhere doesn't think that they're important to hear from or be able to learn or even have access to education is indeed very terrifying. I agree. And then Dr. Tolbert, would you like to chime in on this as well? How this has affected your work?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Let me start by saying, I do have the privilege to be part of two organizations that, have continued, their commitments with advancing equity, inclusion, and expanding opportunities. And of course, we have to do these things within the context of the legal landscape that we live in, right? But let me just specifically call out the work here at HHMI. One of the things that the leadership here at this institution has done is that we've really thought carefully about how do we define the science that we support, right? It's not just the science that one is sort of doing in the lab, but it's how they do the science as well. And so part of that definition of scientific excellence and scientific leadership is to advance equity and inclusion, right? It is to make sure you're creating inclusive research environments. It is to make sure that you are nurturing and fostering inclusive cultures that individuals from all backgrounds, right, can be successful. Because let's just be honest here, the work of equity and inclusion is to lift all boats. It's to make sure that all individuals can thrive in these spaces. And so, I had the privilege of being part of this institution where, we've been really leading the way in terms of our programs. We have the Freeman Hrabowski Scholars competition that, inaugurated a class of 31 phenomenal individuals from very broad backgrounds. The Hannah Gray Fellows competition that continues to support, postdocs who are transitioning into tenure track positions. And just this year, a program that falls under my portfolio that I support, the Gilliam Fellows program, we open up that competition to to be inclusive of individual small backgrounds. We doubled the number of total applicants that came in, and I was just delighted to see the outcomes of those fellows. We were able to expand our reach in terms of institution types. We have a Gilliam Fellow this year who's from Meharry Medical College, and we were able to expand geographical locations. And if you look at these individuals, they represent, the rich mosaic of our society. And so what I would say, it is real. The challenges are real. We have seen, as already been stated, a number of these offices that have closed, depending on the states that one lives in. It's disproportionate. But what I would say, I think it's important that as leaders, we have to really bake the work of equity and inclusion into the fabric of what we do and into the culture of what we do. And it can't be an ancillary activity, right? It has to just be a part of how we define what it means to be excellent, how we define what it means to do the best science, and all of those things. I think once we get to that point, again, we improve outcomes for all individuals, regardless of their identities.
That's such an important point, like, because it just proves as a testament to why it's important to not just have DEI to sprinkle on a cake or something, but actually have it be a part of the ingredients and, like you said, the fabric of how we're thinking about doing things and making decisions and including people. And also, thank you for touching on the various initiatives that HHMI is spearheading to make sure that all voices are being invited to the stage, because when DEIJ is wielded correctly as a weapon to make sure that there's no erasure of certain communities, it ensures that people can actually participate comfortably and lead their best lives. Janelle, would you like to answer in on this?
Yeah, of course. I think to start out, this year marks the 70th year of the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education. And I think about that because I have grandparents that are older than that ruling, right? And remembering a time when our right to receive higher education and practice research was seen impossible, basically. And the decision that has been dealt out has made it difficult for me as an early career researcher in terms of applying to certain programs or universities that I was interested in. I can no longer have the confidence to say that my application will necessarily be reviewed holistically and looked at as just a student who is interested in research and going forward in terms of graduate programs. And so by no means am I trying to make the conversation a political one, but I make no mistake, science is political, right? And our civic responsibility as neuroscientists and our role as community organizers means that we have the platform and the resources and the awareness to address these issues surrounding DEI in our broader scientific community. To touch a little bit on what Dr. Tolbert was saying, because a person's right to feel seen and heard, and especially at this stage, is important, and it shouldn't have to wait, and it shouldn't have to hide behind these rulings, essentially. And so it's ignited my passion and for the work that I do as a community organizer, to find avenues of collaboration with different groups in order to engage in the work that we do here, and renew our commitment to DEI at my institution. My specific program is through the Neurodegeneration Challenge Network as part of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And it's working towards having the pipeline for graduate HBCU students to get into these institutions, to be able to create the avenues for more young scientists to be put in these environments and be the change that they want to see. So I'm very grateful that I get to engage in that work every day in my specific lab, and at the grassroots level, but hopefully we can see that change be elevated all the way up to the top.
Thank you so much, Janelle, for your transparency and also just touching on how important it is to ensure that when you're in a space, like, you feel like you belong there. You don't feel like, oh, like, maybe because I can't be selected because I identify as this, or this is my intersectionality, but I can thoroughly be in this space. And then to your point about having, because of the decision that has been enacted, having how your application may be handled by certain institutions or by higher places of education, how that's altered is incredibly, incredibly important to shed light on, because on its back um, side, it may seem like nothing to people that may be like, oh, why not use something like the number of languages someone speaks as a priority when they're applying to something, or maybe if they're first generation, use other avenues other than race, the actual main piece of the cake per se, when selecting applicants, because all of these external things that they're trying to point to connect to race and that person's identity and how they grew up and their heritage and everything. So I thank you for your transparency and just your honesty and sharing about that. In this last segment of these questions, I'd like to ask our panelists here, how do you feel about the decision of some institutions to remove diversity statements in wake of the decisions that have been made?
So I will be very blunt, and this is a personal opinion on this. I think it's ridiculous. That is how I feel about it. And I feel that way because by removing them, you're essentially saying that you don't want to know or care about how people are going to make their labs and departments welcoming spaces, right? And the fact is, like, everyone should be thinking about it, whether or not you come from a marginalized background. Like, everyone should be thinking about how are we making these spaces welcoming and inclusive for all people. And so you should have, I hope, thoughts and opinions on that, and you should be able to articulate them in a statement. And this is important, especially because if these departments, even as they're removing these statements, they're still saying that they want to create inclusive departmental cultures, right? But how can you say that you want to do that without ensuring that the people you're bringing into those departments have those same values? And you can't assess those values if you're not asking for them up front, right? Like, you're not able to fully assess the applicant as a whole and what they view bringing into these spaces unless you're actually asking about it. And so I don't like the idea of, not asking for these statements. I think that it's incredibly important. I think that everyone should be able to articulate their ideas and their values in the same ways that they're able to articulate their thoughts about science.
Well said, Dr. Gibbs. I think ridiculous is definitely the word. It definitely sends a message, not necessarily a good one. And when we have these conversations around DEI, a lot of the time, our paperwork is our safety net, right? Those words are kind of almost thresholds for people to abide by when they're conducting university business or scientific research. And so removing those can seem almost like the fail-safe is gone in that sense for a lot of people in their position in these kind of environments. So Dr. Tolbert, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say on the matter.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I want to be I guess conscientious and sensitive to our colleagues who are at various institutions in various places where there is real, pressure on them as it relates to these statements and using them, and it is differential, right? Depending on where you reside in this country, what institution you have, in some cases, the privilege to be a part of, that you can continue to utilize DEI statements as a part of your hiring practices, whereas other places, because again, the social political climate, you can't. So I do want to be sensitive to the realness that some individuals at these places, administrators, are experiencing. I guess one of the things I would sort of add on to the conversation is that I think that, these statements are only effective when they're not performative, right? And I think there is real opportunity to connect, what applicants, what scientists, professors, their views on equity and inclusion in terms of how they incorporate this into their teaching, how they incorporate this into their research, how they think about their service. And I think there's real ways that you can continue to capture what people sort of believe in terms of the importance of equity and inclusion as academics, as individuals who are training the next generation of scientists, and also what it means as leaders in general. So I do, again, just to restate this, I am sensitive to the differences within the country in terms of the climate, and that the statements, if they are only performative, they're not helpful. But there are, again, ways that this can be tightly coupled to, what does it mean to be an excellent educator, an excellent teacher, an excellent researcher, and the type of service work that you do.
That's a very insightful way to look at it, Dr. Tolbert, and I appreciate the fact that you are sensitive towards individuals who are kind of working through the motions, right? This is something that affects all of us in different capacities. And so you bring up a very, very interesting point that I can segue into our next question, but I do want to give the floor to Emanuela about how this impacts you and how you feel about it.
Yeah, so I believe that the removal of the statements is kind of a coward move. I don't know if you remember, like back in 2020, when there was a lot of just movement going on with concerning police brutality and everything that was happening in that summer. And people were being told to, specifically on Instagram, like post like black screens, like to be in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And it was incredibly performative because somebody can just put it on their story or put it on whatever social media platform that they wanted. And it was just there and it did nothing. So unless there's actual action and initiative that is backing the diversity statement that's being posted to say to people, hey, if you want to come into this space, if you want to be a part of this educational experience, if you want to take on this opportunity, your voice is recognized here. There will not be a erasure of your presence, and you won't be made to feel like if you bring an idea, if you can contribute to conversation, you won't be shot down, but rather your idea will be brought to the table and considered like everybody else that's at the table. So I think that taking it away just also goes to show that maybe that company or that institution didn't really care about diversity in the first place. If it was just a bunch of words attached to an application or attached to a posting or a section of their website that's in accordance with their mission or values. So I think it's really a cowardice move and just shows where companies and institutions really stand in regards to DEI.
Absolutely. Well said. I think this is a great segue for where we are in the conversation, to ask you guys, in light of the ruling and for those who are feeling pushback from their employers or investors, what are ways or best practices in advocating and demonstrating that this is still an important investment?
Yeah, again, I think that the key is to make the real case that equity and inclusion are just part of just being excellent, right? It's a part of having organizations, institutions, to really sort of be performing at their highest levels, because they are bringing in a very broad set of talent and perspectives. And we know there's evidence to support this, but we just know that when you have different perspectives, different opinions, different lived experience, going through the motions, having the discussions, the conversations, the outcomes are more robust. They're more rigorous. They're better. And so I think that the key here is to really just continue to drive that home. Like equity and inclusion, this benefits all. It benefits the entire organization. It's not just about a certain group of individuals. We understand that certain groups of individuals have been historically marginalized for all the reasons. But when we're designing programs, activities for those who are on the margins, it benefits everyone, right? And so I think that's part of the message, is that this is about being excellent. And to really be excellent means that you got to have broad uh, opinions and perspectives as a part of your organization.
I need a minute to just take in that knowledge right there. That was such a powerful statement. Um, wow. Uh, Dr. Deuce, do you have anything to add on to that? Because I think that was amazing.
Yeah, I feel like that summed it up very beautifully. But I also just want to add, there's many different types of appeals, like depending on who it is that you are talking to, there's different approaches that you can take. So obviously like the logical appeal about how, diverse perspectives, it enhances our science, it increases like equitable experiences for everyone. I think what Dr. Tolbert was talking about really ties in, at least for me, because I'm a teaching professor and like I care a lot about inclusive pedagogy practices. There's this framework for universal design for learning, and it's essentially where we make structural changes in our classrooms that, yes, accommodate like students with disabilities or who need, extra support. But at the end of the day, by making those changes, it supports everyone in the class, right? Like it supports all students. It makes it better for every single person. And it's the same thing with DEI work, right? We're making things better for everyone. And so there's that logical approach. There's also data-driven approaches. I think as scientists, we like to, see data, and there's different types of data that tie into this work. It can be, by the number of grants, or people get a faculty position, or however else you want to quantify it. But I also think we tend to forget sometimes about like qualitative data and people's lived experiences and their feelings of belongingness and community, and just their confidence to continue to succeed in this field. And I think all of those are equally valuable pieces of data that can be shared. And then the last bit, I know that this is, harder, but it's just the emotional side. And obviously that's where I think most of my thoughts and feelings lie, because I am an emotional person and that's how I express myself. And sometimes that does work for appealing to other people, is by, just pushing the fact that people really do have the right to be able to thrive in higher education. Like we all inherently have that right. And that is something that I firmly believe in. And so there's these different types of appeals depending on the audience that you're working with. And maybe it does help to collaborate with other people who, like I said, I'm more of an emotional person. So collaborating with someone who's maybe a bit more logical or data driven, right? And then we can work together to convey our message and try to appeal to folks in terms of helping them see the value of this work.
I appreciate the fact that the conversation has holistically become the idea that it's not a one size fits all solution, because it's not a one size fits all problem, right? And so we're able to kind of address that in different capacities and understand that people who are able to speak on the issue may come from a more limited scope of things, versus others who might have the ability and the resources to actually create the impact that they want to see. So I'm very grateful for both of your answers and in setting that kind of narrative. With the time that we have, I would love to transition to our audience. They have been engaging in this conversation with us. And so we have a few questions here for the panelists. And the first one is, have you ever experienced or witnessed differences in approaches to DEI outcomes and goals among fellow DEI leaders in your fields? And can you reflect on the situations, or how have those differences affected you?
I can start with that one. I absolutely have, right? I think even just with this panel, we have different thoughts and like perspectives on how we approach things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's like the beauty of being able to have these conversations, is by hearing the perspectives from other folks, and being open to like actually listening. And maybe you try something new, maybe that opens your idea and like you have a different approach for talking about it with someone else. I do think that being willing to approach those conversations in different ways and being willing to like learn from each other that's really the whole point of DEI, right? Like that's the whole point of all of the things that we're actually doing is like by allowing diverse perspectives and by allowing these different viewpoints into the space is what makes things better. And so I think it's okay that, you know, different DEI leaders have different approaches in our fields. But I think that we should listen to each other and like try to come up with whatever the best solution is depending on the situation.
Yeah, maybe I'll just jump in. I think I appreciate Dr. Dukes pointing out, you know, even within this panel, how, you know, we have a lot of shared overlapping sort of themes, but, you know, approach is distinct, and it's actually important, right? And again, that sort of goes into the whole concept of why inclusion is so important. You know, one of the things I'll say that I where I am now, you know, in my career and my sort of my life and my sort of thinking back on my lived experience, I talk a lot about really the culture of STEM, and I try and focus the conversations there and to remind, you know, my colleagues that there are individuals who are on the margins of STEM regardless of identity, right? That and we have to do more to increase opportunities, inspire those individuals, regardless of where they are. They can be from, you know, rural parts of the country where they don't have access to STEM, they don't have access to higher education, and they're on the margins. They can be from, you know, inner city, urban areas. And again, they share a commonality. They're on the outside. And so what can we do within the STEM ecosystem to increase opportunities for all individuals, regardless of their backgrounds? Because ultimately, if we are going to be the very best in terms of advancing science in this country, we have got to get those individuals, we've got to get the next generation of scientists inspired. They're going to come from many different places. And once we have them within our spaces, we have to nurture and support their development and make sure that they can actually thrive.
Absolutely. I think that cultivating those spaces within the STEM ecosystem is going to be crucial and fundamental to us even addressing the issue, right? And having those new perspectives and those new voices come in to develop better solutions as our society continues to change and as science continues to change altogether. And so I think that gives us a wonderful segue into a question that I think is kind of a fun question because it lets us stretch our imagination a little bit. But in a perfect world, what does giving DEI a seat at the table look like? So anyone who wants to start with that one.
I can jump in here. I think in a perfect world, it's such a lovely question. Giving DEI a seat at the table looks like continuing to do things like this, right? Amplifying voices that DEI like actually affects and ensuring that the workload doesn't just fall on us, but that people that are external might not be directly affected by DEI decisions are actually and are in positions of power and positions of leadership and have that agency to say what goes, or actually like, okay, we're not just hearing these people, we're actually listening to what they have to say. And we want to ensure that they're being heard and actual change is being enacted so that the same issues aren't being recycled and discussed year after year after year without actual change being enacted. I would also just say, for example, so I know a few years ago, Black and Neuro, I think it was back in 2021. So shout out to Angeline and then a few others that were participating in this initiative. But there was a paper written just concerning beyond 1 week. Black and Neuro Week, right, is the 1 week where we do still read round, but it's the 1 week where we aim to amplify and create space for Black excellence in neuroscience and celebrate that we're even here, right? Because seeing people that look like us, being able to walk into, say, the NIH, I don't know, there's probably security and stuff, but being able to be there as an employee and like see someone else that looks like you, maybe in the line to get lunch, or drive up and pull up and see someone that's like in the same space, it's like, oh, wow, okay, I'm capable of being here too, and it doesn't feel weird, and it's not like, oh man, like how am I actually going to be in this space? Of course, there's things that you have to navigate based on the identities that you have and just the intersections that you may come with being in these positions and spaces, but it's nice to see familiar faces or walk by and like have a smile, shout at you. So I think just ensuring that this kind of work continues and it's actually taken seriously and it's not being done in vain, so that the seeds of transformation that we're trying to plant in various spaces that we're in, whether that be virtually like this or even in person, to conferences we're invited to or talks that we're able to give, are actually able to grow and thrive and take root for the future. So I believe just continuation of this work and giving us platform and spaces to be able to voice out our experiences is incredibly important. Anyone else like to hop in on that note? Getting close.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think y'all are just so like, and I'm mostly speaking to the two of y'all because y'all are like the next generation. You're like the future of these things, and you give me so much hope. And like I truly love to see it. And I'm so impressed with both of you. I have a slightly different take in terms of like a perfect world. What does giving DEI a seat at the table look like? And it's mostly because I feel like lately, a lot of people have been using like DEI or woke or whatever to like try to say things instead of what they really mean. And we're not saying that DEI deserves a seat at the table. We're saying that Black people deserve a seat at the table. We're saying that Latino people deserve a seat at the table. We're saying that disabled people and first gen people, we're talking about people, right? And we're talking about their voices, and they deserve to be seen and heard and valued and respected. That's what we're saying. And honestly, I think that in a perfect world, it requires us breaking down the table and dismantling the pre-existing systems of white supremacy and structural racism and starting over again. Like we need to rebuild the table. And I think that's what we have graciously been doing with Black and Neuro is we didn't ask for a seat at their table, we built our own table. And that is something that I am incredibly proud of.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to follow both of those. They were excellent and well stated, and obviously with deep passion and conviction. I guess I would add. I would say I think I would the world for me is that it's baked into the fabric. It's we don't have to talk about it because we live it, we see it, we exist in it. And in the perfect world, I don't make history every time I get a job because other people like me have come before and they exist in those spaces. And so, yeah, so I think I agree with everything that's been said. Maybe I just said it in a slightly different way.
Well, thank you all so much for just being present here and in this space with us today. We truly appreciate your insights and just taking the time to discuss such a pertinent issue. And with that, I'd also like to thank our conference sponsors again, and a huge, huge thank you to our live captioner and our sign language interpreter. As a reminder, everyone, this and all of our events will be available on our YouTube. And if you haven't yet, please, please, please engage with the conversation, whether it be on X, Twitter, Instagram, well, social media in general, with the hashtag neuroracism, as well as hashtag BINW 2024 or 24, and across all Black and Neuro platforms. So for most up-to-date information on the conference, because we do have more programming coming for you later in the week, please check out our conference booklet or our website. And with that, thank you all so much, and we hope to see you at the rest of our events. Bye.
Thank you.